Recording here. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jesse Spencer-Smith, and I'm Chief Data Scientist at the Data Science Institute. And glad that you all are here today. We're going to be talking today about the application of large language models and generative AI to the very broad field of the humanities. And just so you know, this is not meant to be anything other than really an introduction to possible approaches that you might be interested in. So there's a lot to this field, but in my interactions with folks, I'm noticing that there are some tools that folks just don't know about. So I'd like to share some of those with you and some possible approaches as well. But first, I'd like to start out with asking you all, how are you currently using generative AI, if you're using generative AI, in your studies or in your research or in your teaching? How are you using these tools?
Yeah, I just don't get enough chances to use one.
But if you're answering, if you could speak up just a bit more, that would be that'd be helpful. Okay, so Stephanie, say you use that as a jumping off point. Interesting. So you use it in your own preparation to sort of get inspiration and brainstorm. Fantastic. I think a lot of folks do that. That's great. Stephanie, if you don't mind, let me ask you, which model do you use when you're doing this? GPT-4. Yeah, that's a good choice. Some folks don't go beyond ChatGPT 3.5, which is far less of a model than GPT-4. What are some other examples of how you're using these tools currently? Oh, so David, great, as a creative writer, still experimenting with prompts and editing for personal use. Absolutely. That's actually a good use too, though. Some people assume that because it's generative AI, you use it to write, but actually, as you're discovering, you can use it to edit as well and to give you feedback. Have you found, let me ask you, have you found that sort of feedback useful? Have you landed on something, or are you still, as you say, experimenting?
Jesse, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Easier than typing. So at this point, personally, one of the things that I've been doing with, again, with personal writing is I'll load some of my writing, request that the AI stylize and contextualize my writing. We name it, and then I use that in editing for other pieces. So when I'm coming through with something that's similar, I ask it to refer back to original context.
Fantastic. That is great. What model are you using to do this?
I bounce back and forth, mostly from Bard to Chat. At this point, I don't have GPT-4, so I'm living with that limitation of the third generation. But I'm using them back and forth because I find that each of those have different strengths and weaknesses, even at this point.
That is a great insight. That's right. Many of the models are really have different strengths and weaknesses. One of the big ones that we're going to talk about in just one moment is something that's called context length. So Henry, you shared that you use GPT-4, works well to create initial responses. That's great. So sort of start, right? Oh, and some software alternatives as well. Proposing novel words and concepts based on the context. That's one. It's actually really quite good for brainstorming, especially as you set the context. That's also a great use. Recent study at Harvard Business School found that that models with good prompting outscored some of their own MBA students in terms of creativity in brainstorming sessions. Not all the time, but they scored really quite well. Fantastic. These are all great uses. What I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest some other uses as well. And we're going to talk about another aspect of models that can get overlooked. Does anybody know off the top of their head about how much text, how many interactions you can have? So what's the sort of, if you were to type out all your interactions with say, GPT-4, how long could that be before the model cuts you off or just it begins to forget what you were talking about at the very first. Anybody have an idea of how long that context length is? You can type it or you can unmute and share if you'd like. Let me ask this. How many people have put in something and you went over the length? Yeah. So David, you've run over the length before. Actually, since you nodded, would you mind telling me what happened when you did? Well, what did it do?
So my response went from specific to the previous conversation directly to something in the current string, and it just kind of ramped off that. So it took something that essentially was out of context for the previous communication, and it just kind of went off on a tangent. Gave me information, but it had nothing to do with the previous.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So what happens is either it's going to cut you off, or almost worse, it's simply going to start just forgetting what you had previously. And yes, you're absolutely right. And Andrew, you almost gave it a little way away a little bit, but yeah, context length for GPT-4 is about 8K. And so that's going to be about 6,000 words, maybe 2 or 3 typewritten pages. It's not that much. And this has some significant drawbacks. But you mentioned something that I'm going to be talking about here, which is Claude.ai. Claude.ai is another type of model that has much, much longer context length. So let's talk a little bit about what context length is and why it might be important. So one is, if your context length is a bit shorter, then you only can chat for so long before it begins to lose the thread of the conversation. Second, it also means that you don't get to put longer documents in there. So if you want to summarize a document, just in the simplest use case, that summarization can only happen for maybe a small portion of the article that you're dealing with. And finally, perhaps even more importantly, when you're interacting with the document, you can't interact with the whole document all at once. Let me ask you all this. Give me a thumbs up, and you can get to this under your reactions. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever interacted with ChatGPT or a generative AI model and asked it questions and had it make up something. So this is sometimes called hallucination. So give me a thumbs up if you've, yes. So I think everyone would probably be giving a thumbs up if you could actually find your reaction button, because this is pretty general, right? You find this. So this is not ideal, especially if you want to, if you're interested in a particular topic, a particular paper. It makes it very difficult, because if you're depending on the model for its general knowledge of what it's been trained on, there are a couple of problems there. One, it's going to hallucinate, meaning it's doing what we told it to do. It's producing the next most likely word, and that's how it's doing everything that it's doing. It can do amazing things with that, but it means also, if it doesn't have exact access to something, it's going to generate something which is plausible. So this means that if you're interested in interrogating a longer, a particular topic, are you going to get the right answers or not? Maybe not. Ideally, what we'd want to do is to maybe give it a reference that we're going to be questioning it on. Give it all the information it needs, but then actually ask about specifics. But you can't do that with short context. It doesn't work with short context. So that's one thing. Another thing is, the information of the models is not necessarily completely up to date, nor is it expansive. So we've covered that it's not expansive, and if it doesn't know well, then it's going to make up. But also, training for GPT-4 ended in September of 2021. So it doesn't know anything since then. Some models are fresher in how, when they've been trained, but it's still a limitation. So how do we get around the problem of being able to deal with facts and information, with updated information, and be able to actually interact with longer documents? It turns out these all have kind of the same solution, and that is to use a different model when you're interested in these things. A different model, in this case, model, and Andrew, you mentioned this before. It's Claude.ai. So here's the interface for Claude.ai right here. And you notice a couple of things. First of all, it's a different company. It's called Anthropic. And you can upload files. You can upload to ChatGPT. But the thing which is really interesting about this is that this model has a very long context length. So the chat context length for GPT-4 is 8K. For this one, it's 100K. So the 100K is 100,000 tokens. A token is a word or a subword. So if you turn this into words, it's about 75,000 words. So really quite extensive. So I'd like to go through a sample problem with you, one that I actually had and one that I actually did, just to get across what this might look like. So first of all, I'm a big opera fan, and one of the things I like Wagner's Ring, like the different characters. And one character that's really quite interesting to me in this is Erda. So Erda is the mother of the Norns, is the earth goddess, is font of all knowledge. Is supposed to be very very well known, so the interesting thing about Erda is that when you wake Erda up and you speak to Erda, at first, she's very well oriented. She knows everything, can answer all questions, also, although she may not. But then as the conversation goes on and as she's sort of in the world and talking with you longer and longer, then things start to go wrong. She gets confused. She's less oriented. And so this has interested me and for some time, but boy, when generative AI came along with these short context lengths, I started to say to myself, wow, that kind of sounds like Erda. Isn't that interesting? And I wonder how far this could go, to sort of compare the two. But I never really had time to, and I never really had a good, source that I could go to. And I tried doing this with chat, but it just, didn't quite go too well. So what we're going to do here is, this is a paper reflection written on Erda. It's really quite extensive, and I'm going to see if we can't go ahead and upload this, get a summary, and ask questions of it, and then we're going to see if we can't take it to the next level as well. So to make this a little bit easier, what I did was I went ahead and first of all, I got. You don't have to do this. You can upload the actual PDF as well. But I just got all of the text here. So this is all of the text of this. And so I just grabbed the entire text. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to upload this to Claude. So here I'm going to click on the $sign. And also just to, if you want to, if you'd like to play along, go ahead and go to Claude.ai. And you can actually see what I'm using right here. If you want to go, and I'll paste these into the chat if you want to try this at home. So chat, here we go. Here's the link to Claude.ai. And then here's the link to a repository that I'm using to do this. And this is from a presentation that I actually gave on this Saturday. So here you can get to all the text if you want to actually try this with me. So what we're going to do is in Claude, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this text that I've already downloaded here. And let's see, so here's a Project Muse text. So I've uploaded this and I'm going to start a new chat. The first thing that it's going to do is it's going to pull in this text and it's going to pull it all into context, and then it's going to give us a summary. So keep in mind, this thing is, gosh, how many pages is this? This is what, 20 pages, 30 pages? 23 pages total of, single space type. So pretty dense here. Absolutely would not fit in GPT-4 or even the extended length GPT-4, not going to fit there. But here it all fits. And it gives us a summary here, which is not bad. I'm going to zoom this in a little bit so we can see a little bit better. All right, so it gets that it's from the ring, has superior knowledge. Confrontation shows Erida's knowledge failing because Votan knows more about current events. Doesn't that sound familiar? So yeah, the models are quite knowledgeable, but they don't have current events. And so it begins to shift Erida's absolute knowledge versus Votan's knowledge gained through experience. So it's different types of knowledge. Oh, and you know what? I may have misspoken. I know that Erda is the mother of Brunhilde and, boy, see, now I have to check my own knowledge. I don't remember if she's actually the mother of the Norns or not, but be that as it may, and feel free to correct me here. Okay, yes, and Andrew, you might be getting a problem if you are on a VPN. For some reason, you can't get to it if you're on a VPN. If you're local on the network here, or if you're your home network, then you're fine. Apologies if you can't get to this right now. Okay, so interesting, not a bad summary of this complex writing about Erda. So we can begin to, we can ask for a little bit more, so we can interact with the text now. This is different from interacting with ChatGPT and trying to ask about general knowledge. Now what's going to happen is it's going to be going after directly the information it has because it's all within the context. Hallucinations, the problems that we have with models are far mitigated, are greatly mitigated when we're interacting with text in this way. So now we can say, explain further why Erda becomes more confused as the conversation proceeds. And we'll see if it can provide a little bit more information. Okay, asleep and disconnected, world itself is changing, Votan has more information. Timeless but ungrounded knowledge. Okay, so let me go and jump, can you make an analogy between transformer-based, pre-trained transformer large language models? Let's just jump right to it. And Erda. And I'd appreciate any questions that you have that you might want to explore. Go and put them into chat, and we'll try those out as well. All right, so this is not bad. This is kind of what we intimated earlier in the previous conversation. World knowledge, you train them into the models are trained, the model has the information, but it is outdated. Okay, and interesting, starts becoming outdated and rigid, much like how language models are outdated and biases in the training data. That's interesting. Unaware of new developments. Votan has different ways of gaining direct knowledge. And impressive but limited nature of knowledge gained solely through static information absorption. So not bad. Sort of a collection, a nice synthesis of our thinking of large language models and this model. So you can see that we can have much richer interactions when we have a large context and have an entire text, even if it's a complex, extensive text, if it's all in context. So then we can actually work with it. Any other questions or suggestions? Summarize the analogy based on what's available on the web. Okay, that's a good question. So David, this model does not have access to the web. So that's one problem. So we'd have to feed it the information. And two, you'll notice this with Bing Chat and with ChatGPT, even when I have access to the web, it's only pulling out chunks. So by chunks, it is like a paragraph, maybe a little bit more than a paragraph. And then that is all that it gets. It doesn't, it's because it's designed for models with much more limited context, it pulls out only small chunks, so you don't get the full information. Plus, you don't know what it's getting. So that's the other thing. If you allow it to make the call, it's going to be making the call and bringing the data in. And if you're using Bing, it's using Bing, to do the search. So you're unsure what you're getting. So yes, you could, but it's not curated. You don't know what's coming in, and you're only getting some small section of what's coming in.
So my question specifically, though, was if you were to take that question to ChatGPT rather than Claude and just say, based on what you know, based on the web, would it be able to give any similar expression of that analogy?
Okay, well, let's give it a shot. Actually, we'll do ChatGPT, and let's see if I've been upgraded yet to the. Maybe I have. Yes, I think it will be able to do the search directly here. So let's go ahead and put in, and I'll just have to give it a little bit more context, and I'll have to say, so we'll say, and we'll see what it has. Again, it'll likely, using its pre-trained knowledge, it looks like it's not doing a call out to the web right now. Yeah, see, it's not picking up on the fact, on that nice, knowledge just known versus knowledge gained, right? So not bad, but it's missing the central thesis, which is experiential knowledge versus just known static knowledge, even if it's all encompassing, which is interesting. It's showing, it's demonstrating its own shortcoming here. So any other questions that you want me to try with just this one text? Okay. We've not used all of the context length yet. We still have a fair amount left. So one thing that we can do is now we can pull up another article. So now you can have two articles in memory and you can bounce one against the other, or even multiples. So now you can actually say synthesize between the two, compare, contrast. Now you can really dig into two or more articles at once. We'll take a small step towards this right now by adding in another prompt here. Let's see if, okay. So here is just information on what happens with chat conversations when they go on too long. Because right here, this is it made an interesting comparison between models and ERDA. But now what I want to do is I want to get specifically to is when Wotan's talking to ERDA, is that like when we are talking to the large language models in terms of that context length limitation? How far can we draw that analogy out? So here, this is a description of what happens. Let's go ahead and zoom into this a bit. When a chat conversation exceeds the context length, then model may start to repeat itself or lose the thread of conversation. Model may provide more generic, vague responses, may contradict itself, may ask the user to restate. These are all the things that happens in a fairly short, this is like a page, it's running off the side here, but maybe half page description of what happens with models when you run out of context length. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to copy all of this, and we're going to give this up to Claude. I'm not going to upload it. I'm just going to put it in context window. You're going to see how it handles it. The following is a description of what happens when you run out of context length in a conversation with an LLM. Okay, and so this is, I just gave it all of that information. Could someone help me out here? What should I ask to sort of compare the two? How might I phrase comparing ERDA to this? Could somebody propose some wording for me? And here, again, whenever you give it significant text, it gives you a summary of this. Does someone have some suggested wording of how I can ask the model to compare ERDA with the conversation with ERDA with the conversations with models when they run out of context length? Oh, lovely. Okay, great. Uh, please compare, acting as an English professor, please compare the conversation Wotan has with ERDA to the prior paragraph on the effects of running out of context length. That's being pretty literal. The human describes the context length to an AI. Teacher-student dynamic, that's interesting. So, with models with long context length, you can interact with the model in a qualitatively different way than with short context length models. So David, let's try that. Let's see if this gets different. So let's, please, acting as a sociologist, analyze this comparison. And I'm having to say acting as rather than you are, because Claude no longer allows you to do personas. It kicks it out almost immediately. So David, what do you think? How did it take on the role? How would you grade its analysis of and you can unmute David if you'd like to share. Great. Yeah, that's right. So this is really quite different, isn't it? So it is using the context, and this is the interesting thing. Because you have this long context length, what happens in context within context is that every element can interact with every other element that you have within context. And depending on what you say is most important, that could reshape how everything else is interpreted. And in a way, this is sort of at the heart of what we all do, right? Given a particular viewpoint, given some new information, especially if we say use this information, it reinterprets everything else in the context. That's the job of what's called attention in these large language models. Everything is recast in terms of this. So this was a great example, and thank you for this, David. So I said sociologist. Now everything else is recast in terms of that new point of information. And it's only possible if it's all sitting within context. So that's where the 100,000 K or the 100,000 token context length comes in incredibly helpfully, because now everything in an instant is recast based on the new job you've given it or the new information that you've given it. So let me pause here. And ask you, does this open up possibilities that you'd not previously considered? And I'd greatly appreciate you thinking about this for a moment, either sharing in chat or unmuting. So does this bring to mind other applications you'd not been able to approach before using large language models? And Holly, can I tap you to with a long context model, does that open up possibilities that you did not have before if you have a long context model versus the regular length context model? Do you mind me calling on you asking?
You want me to unmute?
Please.
The more context you have, the more the large language model will be able to work with, so that you can reduce the amount of craziness that comes out of it, i.e. hallucinations. Jesse, is that sort of what you're looking for?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just sort of any of your initial thoughts on the difference between a long context model and shorter context.
Yeah, the more time context you're able to give it, the more it can work with. But at the same time, if it's not, it depends on the limits, the context length limits. And I think, Jesse, I came in a little bit late. I think that's why you're showing off Claude, is because Claude has it has much more robust context limits. So it can work with more, and it can hold more in its quote brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And so, David, yeah, you're sharing that, at the surface level, you hadn't used multiple points of view. You're right, because normally in a short context window, you might get part of an article, first of all, not even the entire thing, and you only get to do a few things before you're done. So with this, you can look at it from multiple different viewpoints, and still have room. Excellent. I love that. What else? What are some other thoughts of yours of possible applications of a model like Claude that has long context length? Then let me go ahead and share a few other possibilities that I'd like for you to be aware of. First of all, let me go ahead and I'm going to give you another use of the model that and this speaks to the ability of the model to take significant text. So this is a report. I was doing this yesterday with some friends taking a look at an analysis of a pretty in-depth report on the high cost of housing, 2023, and this covers all 50 states. This has a write-up of the impact of all these different this is pages and pages and pages of this analysis. And then, the first thing is it gives you a nice summary. That's fantastic. But then the other thing that you can do is you can ask it now to do specific things. So you can pull out very specific parts of the report. This is something you would never do with a regular length model because it's going to start hallucinating. But here, because this long context has the entire report all at once, you can ask it to do things like this, like pull out information, and you can be fairly confident. You'll still want to check, but fairly confident that what you're going to be getting out is going to be correct. And then you can do things like ask for further analysis of subsections of this without having to reload, without having to count on it, pulling things from some memory store. It's all in memory. You can all work with this directly. Yes, the other thing which is really quite nice about this, and I do this all the time, is that I will get a summary, and I do this actually with I do this with ChatGPT, for example, pretty frequently, and because the transcripts tend to be very long, they can't fit into a regular context model, regular context. So here, this is the context of everything up to this point from this meeting. Okay, this already is too long to put in Claude or any of the other models. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this into, I'm going to start a new chat, and I'm going to put everything that we just talked about so far in this meeting into Claude to ask for a summarization. So absolutely, this is something that you can do if you have your transcripts turned on during your meetings. Context is too long for GPT-4, not too long for Claude. And so here's a summary of what we've just had. Long context models open possibilities like close reading of literature, comprehensively searching tests, analyzing multiple sources. So this is not a bad summary. And then pro tip, if you have meetings where actually assigning things, you can say, please list the action items and the responsible person. It's not going to do that because we don't have any action. So you can also pull out things like that. So it's mighty useful for that as well. So meeting minutes research meeting minutes, group meeting minutes actually works quite well for that. Thank you for that suggestion and for that question. All right, we have just a few more moments. I'm gonna mention first of all, any questions about okay. Oh, and Dr. Yeah, you also had. So looking at the revolution, you can compare different pieces of work and look at the progression. That's interesting. So early work, later work, latest work. Yes, you have enough room to do that, not just of, well, this is interesting, not just of someone else's work, but it could be your work. It could be the writing of a student as well. Keep in mind, you're uploading this so you're giving this away to Claude. So this has to be, make sure that this is not FERPA. This is not protected information at all. But yes, you can actually say and analyze progression of writing over time as well. Any other other uses or suggestions? Yeah, and Holly, yes, would you like to make a pitch for your Humanities in the AI newsletter? Would you like to make that now? Because really we're at the point where we're almost at the end. So I'd like to point out for next steps, how do you learn more? How do you actually learn how to use this in your work and your research, especially in the humanities? Holly, let me go and ask you to unmute. Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Holly Tucker. I direct the Robert Penn Warren Center for the Humanities. And like everybody else, I'm an absolute student in this. And I want to thank Jesse and the Data Science Institute. They have a generosity that is incomparable, a level of excitement and patience that is just remarkable. So when Jesse says, do you have any questions? Come to me. If I can be at all helpful, do it. One of the things I just want to make a pitch, I put in a link to a email sign up list, and that's to get the Humanities Center newsletter in collaboration with the Data Science Institute and the Grand Challenges, the AI Grand Challenge Initiative. The Humanities Center is doing a bi-weekly newsletter that will highlight anything that we see happening on campus and maybe beyond that could be of interest to folks who are developing their portfolio for research and in teaching around AI. And we're not expecting anybody to have any background in this. So, for example, every other week on Thursdays, the center hosts drop-in hours. So we just, who's here? What are your questions? What are you poking around at? And we share things. We also have a monthly meeting on AI and in the humanities. So please drop, you see the sign up, or you can drop me an email to join. So, and I just want to say thank you, Jesse. Everything that I've come to learn about generative AI has come from my interactions with the Data Science Institute, and I'm even taking Jesse's graduate course about what happens underneath the hood of all this, which is fascinating.
Thank you so much, Holly. And let me make the offer to faculty and to graduate students and to people who are seniors, undergraduates. You're very welcome to join in the course. It really goes under it's an advanced course. It gets you into the architecture of transformer models. But boy, if you want to dive in, would love to have you in the course. So we're at time. Oh, thank you, Dr. Ya. So we're at time. We wanted to do this about 45 minutes. So let me open this up for questions now. I'll stop my screen share. You've gotten a sense of what you can do with long context models and some of the possibilities that I hope that maybe may have opened your eyes to some other possibilities. But like to hold now on the presentation and open this up for any questions you might have about models, long context models, prompt engineering, or the use of AI models in your research or in your teaching. And if you have no questions, then hope to see you at one of our next workshops. What is the next functionality that you want to see come out of these models? This is, I think the next most exciting thing is going to be multimodality. right now, this is really just beginning with GPT-4. There's now GPT-4V, which allows you to include both text and image into the models. And I think that I think that we're seeing now some really excellent examples of just how enriching it is to be able to include both. With audio, for example, it's not just audio to text. What's really going to be interesting is, can you include with audio all of the other rich information which is in that audio signal? And then more challenging, video and audio. Can you use that to include as well? Plus, elsewhere in the sciences, we definitely are interested in multimodal models, from everything from analyzing, asking questions about astronomy, not just with text, but going ahead and training a model on gravity wave data in medicine, and in research, going ahead and including all the different types of measurements that we have, EEGs, for example, when you're asking questions. So that multimodality, I think, is going to be the next most important and powerful advancements. And Joanne, do you have a preference for Claude, ChatGPT, and what are your thoughts on the executive order on AI? Yeah. So first of all, ChatGPT does have some real strengths. GPT-4 in particular, it's multimodal now. It has video, so that's quite nice. So if I'm not constrained by, if I'm not trying to do a chat with a whole document, then I might do GPT-4. It's better at coding, a little bit better at coding than Claude is. So I use all different models for different things. David, you mentioned before you use different models as well. Same thing, sort of figuring out what works best. Some languages are known better by some models rather than others, both spoken languages and also computer programming languages as well. The executive order on AI. I was hoping for more. It seemed, even though they've been working on this for quite some time, it seemed a bit rushed and incomplete. We do need to have regulation. We need to have thoughtful regulation around this. So we need to see more. I would very much like for this to be much more of an open conversation. I don't like the idea of guidance on AI being decided by the tech leaders. I don't think that's healthy. I think that researchers need to be in that conversation. If you say no open models because it's unsafe, well, then research stops. We don't get to do the research that we need to do because all the models are proprietary. So is that really protecting us, or is that protecting your IP? I got to wonder about that. The EU is also going to be making some big moves in AI regulation. Concerning thing from there is it's very opaque. What's going into that? There's a meeting which is going to be taking place. It's being called by the Prime Minister of Great Britain. So what's going to be happening there? It's unclear. I'd like to have a broader conversation that's more informed on the academic side. Great questions. Other questions? Clinical research studies, absolutely. Policy regarding use of AI for clinical research at VU and VMC. Yeah, so VUMC, now, policy regarding for use for AI for clinical research, that's a bit fuzzier. VUMC has very strong guidance and policies around the use of models other than what they have available on through Microsoft Azure and their instance of ChatGPT. They're very concerned about security. Vanderbilt also now has an agreement with Microsoft, so we have access to ChatGPT and even some access to GPT-4. VUMC folks, you have much better access to GPT-4 than we do. Those models are a little bit behind. They're about 6 months behind. They're not the multimodal models yet. There are a number of things that they don't have, but they're catching up. We just had a session with Microsoft this past Saturday where we went over the offerings and how to get work done in a safe way. And that's very helpful. And you're right. Yeah, Josh, that's fantastic. That is their instance of GPT. I believe that one points to GPT 3.5, but I could be wrong, but I know that GPT-4 is available. But really, in terms of clinical research, boy, that is an evolving, it is very difficult to pin down. It depends on what you mean by clinical research. We have a project that we're starting next semester that's around from a craniofacial surgeon diagnosing what's called VPI and VPD. These are the result of incomplete treatment or cleft palate, fissure in the soft palate, and reconnection of that muscle, and so results with difficulty in speech. That's clinical research, but it's audio only, and it's completely unidentified. That compared to others is really quite different. Seem to be camps of folks who believe LLMs are changing things, and others who think it is hype. I had a colleague who's in my department that I heard just the other day say, well, I tried ChatGPT and it came up with an incorrect answer, so all hype. No use for it. And it was a very strong absolute statement. Part of it is a little bit generational, just a part. Part of it is not really engaging and trying out, right? So he had tried GPT 3.5 and he tried it once and did not interact with it, and used it to solve something that we already know the models are not great at. Factual information, if it's not, doesn't have access to the web, or as we saw, you use long context. And two, doing math problems out of the box. We know those are not strengths. But it's so I'd say that you need to engage more. The more informed you are, then you realize, okay, it's possible to do this, it's not possible to do this. For hype, I mean, if all you wanted to do was say the only thing they're good at is helping you program, well, that's a 10 times speed up with computer programming alone. So already it revolutionizes a significant part of our economy. So no, not hype. Is it good for your particular use case? You'll have to engage and to try. Thank you. And Holly, thank you for allowing me to call on you to get the ball rolling with the questions. I appreciate that. Current legal standings will resolve. That's a good question. This is so there are a number of suits. It's easier to see that case with the case of generative AI and diffusion models and images, but you also have that with written models are absolutely being trained on some models are absolutely being trained, and you can clearly so on copyrighted text. Does this count? As fair use. I read the New York Times frequently, and I learn from it, and I absorb the knowledge, and then I take that knowledge, I synthesize it, and then I share it out. So you have an AI doing this. Now, the AI is now they're earning money off of this as well. So is the training of the model the problem, or is it the commercial use of that afterwards? Is this a matter of, if we say no training, that does not seem ideal. That seems like that this is not helpful. If the problem is you're not paying for something that has value that you're training on, that seems more right and more realistic. But boy, how do you disentangle that is a very difficult question. Books, entire novels are an entirely different thing. You learn the style of the author, but you're not copying the entire book because the models get trained on small sections of it, but it's learning about the book. It's not memorizing, it's not storing, but it's learning from the book. So what is fair use when you're training? Is there such thing as fair use when you're training? Or is it the use that you have? If I use it to generate the next the next article by David Blankenship, that's probably a problem. If I use it to understand your writing, is that a problem? I don't know. So completely unresolved, We're completely unprepared at the moment to actually to judge on these things, but we're learning as quickly as we can. Right now, Copyright Office, for example, says copyrights belong to humans only. So anything generated by an AI is not copyrightable, which means if you write code using AI, that code may not be protected because they say a non-human agent was responsible. So how far does that go? These are great questions. All right, folks, we are at the end of our time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your questions, your comments. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you at some of our future workshops. Thank you, David. Thank you, Andy.